Magandang Umaga. Good morning, everybody. Bit of a chat today about travelling by ferry in the Philippines. Obviously, with 7,000 odd islands, there's going to be a lot of different ferry routes. Some of them very short, some of them a couple of days or more. But you're always going to see lots of boats out there of different sizes in the Philippines. And my very first ferry ride was I guess the first one of any distance was from Cebu to Ormoc City in Leyte, and it was a super cat or a fast cat. And one thing I remember about it is that they had the Lord's Prayer on the screen just as the ferry was leaving Cebu, and very, very much religious people, the Filipinos, and that was sort of maybe 4 or 5 days into my first trip to the Philippines. I have been on a couple of long trips on Super Ferry, which is now called 2Go Travel, the number 2 and then Go Travel. It operates under that name now. The first one was from Manila to Palawan to Puerto Princesa City, and that stopped in Coron Island, which is in Busuanga, and it was 2 days and 2 nights. And one thing I noticed, one of the other passengers was telling me, I don't know how correct it was, but he said the limit for luggage was 150 kilos a person, so there were a lot of people moving back to the province or moving there, or maybe they were business people. They'd bought something in Manila and they were taking it back, but there were certainly people with huge amounts of bags, the big sort of square tartan bags and plastic bags, and obviously the ferry was the way they could travel back with all that luggage. Now, there were different classes on the ferries. The class I was in on that particular ferry it was just a huge room with lots of bunk beds, no sort of partitions or anything, just a sort of square area with probably 150 beds for 150 people, so maybe 75 bunk beds. I'm not sure if it was called tourist class. It wasn't the absolute cheapest one. The cheapest one was outside, which had bunk beds sort of pretty much on deck, just a few metres in from the edge of the ship. And I remember going out one night and it was raining and very windy, and sort of seeing the people there in their beds, and I thought I'd made the right decision staying inside. Now the other ones you can have a cabin with about 6 people in it, which has its own air conditioning. Another trip I went on was from General Santos City to Manila via Zamboanga, and that was also 2 days and nights, and I was in that 6-person cabin. There were three guys and 3 girls. Unfortunately, the second night the aircon in the cabin broke down, so it was a bit unpleasant. And then of course you can have your own private cabin, and there's might even be 2 classes of that, a fairly sort of basic one and then a very much upmarket type one. I didn't see inside either of those. Now, one thing I did notice on the first long trip, is that there was an area to charge all your mobile phones, and it was very much an honesty system. There were phones just left there for a couple of hours until they charged up. About 30 or 40 phones being charged up, just sitting there, nobody really keeping an eye on them, and people obviously, there was some sort of unwritten rule about the honesty, and people must have respected that, and I charged my phone up and no problem. I just wonder how many other countries you'd get that sort of level of honesty. You could go up onto the top deck, which is a pretty big area, and there weren't many people up there. The sun was beating down, it was still pretty hot despite being out to sea. Now this picture I actually took of another super ferry passing by. I think this one was going to Iloilo and on to Mindanao after that. But the first trip, when I arrived in Puerto Princesa, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was a full brass band playing and welcoming our arrival, which was quite nice, quite interesting. I wondered if they did that with every ship, because I think there were two a week which came in around that time, so it might have been a regular event. Again, the 2 long trips, as I said, Coron was a bit of a stopover, had a bit of a walk around. The trip from General Santos to Manila stopped in Zamboanga sort of on the second morning, or the first morning rather, You could have a walk around. There was also a shuttle shuttle bus in Zamboanga which could have taken you to the mall. Well, I just walked around, and obviously it would have been a lot easier and quicker just to fly, and I did fly one way. I only took the ferry sort of one way between the two places. I flew from Manila to Davao, I think, and then on to General Santos, and then took the ferry. And I think with Puerto Princesa, I think I took the ferry from Manila to Puerto Princesa, and then I just flew to Cebu, and then I was sort of on my way home. But it's all part of the experience, and you will, yeah, I mean, that's part of the way of life. So you're just being on the ferry and just sort of observing the things, and being part of the experience in the Philippines. And obviously I've been on a lot of small ferries, like going from Cebu across to Lapu-Lapu City, or one particularly rough crossing was from Iloilo to Bacolod. That was a very bumpy boat ride, that one, although a lot of the other passengers didn't seem particularly concerned by it. I found it was a bit nerve-wracking. But no, ferry transport obviously in the Philippines represents a big amount of traffic and movement, given the way the islands are all sort of spread out. And yeah, I guess another thing, there can be delays. The ferry from Manila to Puerto Princesa was delayed by about 5 or 6 hours, and another ferry I was originally going to get from Manila to Davao, there was about a 12-hour delay and then a cancellation. So they do get delayed and cancelled sometimes, and that's all part of life. But anyway, it's just a bit about the ferries. Thanks for listening, guys.